The journey these men are making is shaping Australian history. Small dots in a great wide land, their size belies the magnitude of their achievement. Yet this is only part of a continuing saga, enacted today in the tradition of a great pioneering industry, one in which Australia leads the world, the beef industry. As the leading cattle nation, it's fitting that the biggest individual cattle interest in the world should also be Australian. The AMP Society, our largest life insurance office. Its cattle interests encircle the continent in situations as varied as the land itself, each with its set of problems and challenges for the men and women involved. It's a story of vision and enterprise. In a way, the story of Australia herself. We set our opening chapter in the far north of Western Australia.
The first attempts at settlement of the Kimberley district last century were unsuccessful until explorer Alexander Forrest reported favourably on the land. Here, said Forrest, is the cattleman's paradise. Plains heavy with pasture, watered by reliable rainfall. Again, the pioneers moved in to etch a chapter of fortitude and courage in the history of our nation. But still, Kimberley settlement failed to develop significantly. The problem has remained until our time. Isolation. The early 1970s. A new company challenges this historic area, the Northern Cattle Company. The AMP Society and Placer Exploration, 50% shareholders.
Well, let's have a look at the map.
The management of Northern Cattle, all Australian, headed by Scott McCall, well-known figure in the cattle industry.
On the Halls Creek properties this year. We'll be sending about...
Initially, 5 old Kimberley properties were acquired, linked by beef roads to export meatworks, already established on the coast. Head station of the group was Moola. Like its sister properties, benefiting from the injection of new capital for buildings, for stockyards, fences, bores and dams. Improved management, new bloodlines of stud bulls, and herd numbers increased rapidly. But market outlets were limited. The Northern Meatworks handle lean beef only for export. How to reach the prime beef markets 3,000 kilometres south near Perth? Scott McCall had an answer to this historic problem. Move large consignments south quickly by road and rail. Arrange spelling points en route. Supply them with hay backloaded on the transports. Feasibility studies, recommendations. 5,000 young steers to be consigned the first year. Older beasts still sent to the Northern Meatworks. The best of both worlds. Soon these strong range-bred cattle would find themselves grazing on magic carpets of green. The rich, fattening pastures of Yathru Estates. Southern properties purchased near Perth. Moola. The first consignment planned for May 22nd. But the action starts much earlier. Hundreds of cattle to be mustered and drafted. Tested for pleuropneumonia and tuberculosis. Spray dipped against cattle tick. And finally, tallied and loaded onto the road trains. Routine work, tinged with underlying excitement. The wagons, loaded on schedule, are ready to roll into history, to set the pattern for years to come.
Take her away. Good luck.
A small trickle at first, building to a steady stream. a new artery of commerce, sustaining growth and development in the isolated north. But now it's a test of skill, of endurance, as the truckies move their chargers down the northern beef road, down the side of a continent.
Make the big truck motors roar. Move, no time to roam. Time this herd was here no more. I'm coming home.
3,200 kilometers. 9 days by road and rail, then north again. The massive operation repeated every 9 days during the tropical dry season. Range-bred cattle that will thrive and fatten on the rich pastures of Yathru estates. Increase the supply of prime beef to our local markets. The Kimberley pioneers have been justified. The breakthrough to the southern markets achieved by a new generation of Australians with the same vision to plan, the will to succeed.
While the Kimberley venture is the Society's most recent link in a chain of cattle interests, its involvement with the rural sector goes back to the last century. For since that time, it has led Australian Life Office investment in loans to primary producers. However, the AMP's direct involvement in large-scale primary production really began after World War II. With the aid of CSIRO scientists, they transformed large areas of the 90-mile scrub desert in South Australia and the Big Desert in Victoria into flourishing farm holdings. The experience gained from this successful scrub clearing and pasture development was put to work again in the 1960s near a small fishing village called Tea Gardens, north of Newcastle. The area chosen, unproductive coastal scrubland.
Right.
Johnny, that's bag, please, not bulk. Over.
Rightio, John. In bag. Over and out.
Okay, Tony, thanks very much.
John Collins, a Victorian born to the land. One of the new breed AMP rural development men spawned on the tough proving ground of the 90-mile desert. Now manager of the Tea Gardens project. Errol White, overseer of development for the project. A timberman from way back, born and raised in Tea Gardens. His practical knowledge of local areas invaluable to the scheme's progress.
Oh, that's terrific, Errol. They're cutting through that heavy stuff like butter.
Yeah, it's a pretty clean pull, John. They're blading out the stumps too at the same time. Save us a lot of work over the next few weeks.
Well, it had certainly been the right decision, bringing in the big D9s. This rate would put us well ahead of schedule. The anchor chain, pulled between the two tractors. That had been our big worry. But it was holding well. It ought to. Braking strain 300 tons, weight of each link over 25 kilos.
Bit better than the old chainsaw days, John.
Oh, crikey. And it doesn't seem that long ago either. Yet it's getting on for what, 5 years, Errol?
Yeah, just on 5 years, I'd say, John.
First and foremost task of the Tea Gardens project had been to define the boundaries. A total of almost 14,000 hectares, it incorporated many defunct properties. Fences were almost non-existent or hidden by regrowth since the old timber cutting days. Old maps were the only guide. Theodolite, compass, chainsaw, the tools of the small team that initially tackled this difficult task. The Trailblazers, they called themselves. And there was a third member to the team, one who had exchanged the pen for the plough. Graham Fenwick, a trainee rural valuer with the Society, assistant to John Collins.
Well, all right.
One of our best aids to surveying was the old Cobb & Co track. We could pinpoint the remains of old bridges along the route. It ran Karua to Bulladila, past the old sawmill on the Branch River, one of our biggest timber centres in its day. Sections of the old coach route have been kept open as a hiking track for bushwalkers. Where it goes through our cleared lands, we leave timber stands on either side to retain the natural effect. During that first year, we operated out of tea gardens. But as the scheme developed, I had to be closer to the action. There was an old homestead on the property, but, oh, really beyond repair. So we demolished the lot and built a new one, using all the original handmade bricks. Quite a showplace on what was a pretty run-down area, and for us, a great spot to bring up the family. In its earlier heyday, this section had been a dairy property. The milk cans collected regularly by river barge. In fact, right at the start, we put the old milking shed to good use. Gave it a new roof, a facelift, and there we were, with a smart operations and radio headquarters.
Like any business, the success of large-scale rural development depends on management doing its homework well. Its careful analysis of potential, the setting of practical target dates, and constant on-the-site supervising of budget and financial control. Noel Gowing, former field manager of the 90-mile desert scheme, responsible for all AMP rural development, had set the first year's target at 250 hectares, including boundary surveying. The second year, 1,500. Accelerating to 14,000 hectares cleared and sown within the 6-year establishing period.
Catch up a little bit later on the other country.
Yeah. What do you think we go on with the plan?
Well, that first year's target seemed easy enough, but, you know, we nearly missed out. A shortage of local contractors was the problem. The breakthrough came when we contracted Lynn Schultz, one of the few locals who really knew how to bulldoze scrub. Soon we added a stump ripper, and that was tremendous. The old stumps left by the timber cutters were a real problem. Stacking and burning nearly beat us in the early stages, but we finally got a crawler tractor to stack up the dead wood and actually ended up ahead of the first year's target. Pretty soon, Lynn had a whole fleet of dozers working for us. And with other contractors, we'll have, about 40 machines going as development gets into full swing. By then, we'll be working over 50 men with night shifts to beat the weather and keep to the increased schedules. Well, we were getting remarkably clean burns. The soil sweet, ready for ploughing. But where to find ploughing contractors in an old timber district? Out of the blue, I got a phone call from Bulladila, from a garage owner who said he could make up a unit for us.
Well, good to see you.
Don Legg was his name.
Oh, getting on with it fairly well now. Pushing along a bit.
Sure enough, he and his partners set up a special workshop, built the unit, and had it working in the field within weeks. Each year, as our ploughing contract increased, they kept pace with additional units, even designed and built their own prime movers to speed up the work.
The side effects of the project were now becoming evident. with a marked stimulation of local industry and employment. At peak, the scheme would use 70,000 gallons of fuel a month. Enough posts and fencing wire to stretch from Sydney to Darwin. Gates by the hundreds, all locally shaped and welded. Miles of access roads, graded, filled and serviced. Cement and building materials by the truckload. Seed and fertilizer, thousands of tons delivered to the spreaders on schedule.
This is one operation that must be supervised pretty closely to get the right seed mixes and formulas onto the different soil types. So far, field tests have been promising. Now, for the first time, we were trying the formulas on a mass scale. Seeding times had been carefully planned around the average weather pattern to avoid a washout. But in a 52-inch rainfall belt, you still keep your fingers crossed, waiting for those little green shoots to appear. These early pastures established beautifully, and just as well, for we were down on our area estimates. You see, as part of our natural preservation, we set aside 1 hectare for every 8 cleared. This is done mainly around the creek beds, and, well, there were more creeks than we'd anticipated. This way, we're preserving some fine stands missed by the old timber loggers. Eventually, the whole scheme will be declared a sanctuary.
By the end of the 3rd year, clearing, ploughing and seeding operations were running simultaneously. The targets increased to 4,000 hectares annually. Staff, contractors, equipment and suppliers were doubled, then trebled. Development accelerated rapidly.
Mobile 7 to Mobile 10. Are you in touch with Errol? Over. Graham, get me base. Tell Tony to contact me, please. Whether you can try him this way. That was 4.7. Mobile 7 to base. Are you there, Tony? Tony, would you take some measurements?
As clearing operations approached the distant boundaries of the project, outstations were built for stock supervisors. For by now, phase 2 of the project was underway. The mustering of cattle onto the newly consolidated pastures.
We'd already started our own breeding herd and getting very good calving percentages. But until